Welcome to Dragon Talk.
Yay!
Yes. Let's go to the Feywild.
Dun, dun, it's a carnival time.
You're Greg Tito.
I'm Shelly Moo. Wait, no, you're Shelly Moo.
I'm Shelly Moo.
This is the official Dungeons & Dragons podcast. And we're excited.
I'm so excited. Can you tell? I didn't mean to just say let's go to the Feywild before we even introduced ourselves, but that's how excited I am for this interview.
We are currently in the wild beyond the Witchlight.
Definitely. And it's very, very strange in here. Things keep morphing and changing.
I just saw a face of a tree look at me.
Yeah, that's creepy.
Yeah. And
There's
he's like, don't cut me down.
The flowers are blooming, but then they're also wilting.
It's up, it's down, it's left, it's right.
I don't know what's happening.
It is crazy, though. And we get to talk to Ari Levitch, one of the writers on the Dungeons & Dragons team who was working tirelessly on this book and this adventure over the last year or so, maybe even more. Great stuff. We had just talked to him for some lore you should know recently, but we get even more in depth on what's exciting about this adventure in our interview. So look forward to that.
Yes. Turns out it's everything. Everything is exciting about this.
And of course, we're gearing up for the release of that on September 21st. It's available in two awesome covers. One that is the standard cover that is by none other than Tyler Jacobson. Check it out. And then there is an alternate cover that you can get only through game stores by none other than Hydra 74. So good stuff all around there. We'll be talking about it a ton more over the upcoming weeks, and especially at D&D Celebration. Whew, there's a lot there.
Yeah, there's quite a bit there. D&D Celebration coming to you and everyone, Greg Tito, on September 23rd through the 24th, 25th, 26th.
Shelly's very good at math. But yeah, we got lots of panels talking about what's going on in the Dungeons & Dragons community, not to mention lots of fun interviews and talks with the creators behind Dungeons & Dragons, live games that will blow your mind as far as the creativity within them. I don't want to give any hints, but there might be singing involved.
Could our dreams finally be coming true, Greg Tito?
It's a reality TV show with musical numbers in it.
And roses to hand out.
Exactly.
It's
very
happening.
exciting about all that. You look for more information on that on the D&D Celebration website.
Lots of information on there and information that is constantly being updated. So keep checking back there and make sure you're signing up for those virtual games because those seats went really quickly last year. So if you are thinking about gathering up your party and going to join us at D&D Celebration, make sure that you are signing up soon because we want to make sure that you get your whole party together and also that you get to play on the platform that you want to. Like if you like Zoom or Google Hangouts, whatever. There's a dungeon master standing by, ready to take you on adventure.
And many of those playing in those games, it'll be their first taste of getting to play in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, or at least games that are themed close to that. So that's very exciting. Jump in and maybe you'll be in a game with some of us, rolling some dice and causing some mayhem.
That would be fun.
Super fun. We'll also hear from folks on the D&D team about more upcoming products like Fizzband's Treasury of Dragons that is coming out in October, and Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos. There is content all around those in our panels as well from the D&D team. So, mark your calendars.
Yep. Yes. And go to dndcelebration.com.
Yeah. And all that content will be up on our YouTube channel in addition to our twitch.tv/D&D. So, again, you get to pick your platform. That's what we're all about here.
Pick your platform. You can pick your friend's platform, but you can't pick your friend's nose.
That's not true because I definitely picked my friend's nose. In the Feywild, and it turned into a gelatinous cube.
Anything goes in the Feywild.
It is true. Speaking of anything goes, it's time for you to talk to someone about how to DM.
Well, actually, good topic, because you know what? Not anything does go in D&D when we are talking about creating safe spaces, which is exactly what I'm going to be talking to Beth the Bard about. So there is a really wonderful community on the Instagram called a channel called Women of D&D. And there's an amazing amount of wonderful, diverse creators that get profiled there. And I discovered Beth the Bard there, and I loved her interview because of just her work as a therapeutic dungeon master. And she works a lot with kids and teens, but also a lot of great advice about what it really means to create a safe space for you and your players, and how to be welcoming and how to add more diverse characters to your games. So looking forward to digging into some of those topics.
All right, awesome. Well, let's give a listen and then stick around for our interview with Ari Levitch.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to How to Be a Dungeon Master. I am here with a very special guest. This is Beth the Bard. Now, you may know Beth the Bard. If you don't, you will after this, and you should definitely be following her. Beth is a professional dungeon master. That is correct. A professional dungeon master, a writer who also specializes in therapeutic tools, role play, and neurodivergent accessibility, which you know are all topics very close to my heart. Also, very curious about Beth's feminist reimagining of Curse of Strahd, which is a best-selling DMs Guild title for good reason. I'm going to go ahead and guess. I discovered Beth the Bard on a wonderful Instagram channel called The Women of D&D, where very amazing, talented, diverse group of content creators in the D&D community are profiled. And I read Beth's profile and a short interview and was like, yes, we must be friends and we must be talking about dungeon mastering. So thank you so much for being here, Beth the Bard.
Thanks for having me.
There are so many things that I want to dig in with you. It was very hard to narrow things down. So as we just talked about prior to this interview, you're going to have to come back because you're doing a lot of great work. Also, you're a professional dungeon master, so I think that's kind of interesting to our audience. But what I wanted to focus on is your work that you have that you do when it comes to creating safe spaces with your D&D groups, maybe because a lot of those groups are kids and teens, and also the tools that you use that help with that group cohesion, which I think is a really important part, and one of the great benefits of playing D&D is feeling that connection with your groups. And as a dungeon master, you can help foster that. So, I mean, where to begin, Beth? But possibly, like, if people aren't familiar with the concept of safety tools and creating safe spaces, maybe like why are these things important?
Yeah, so I think they're mandatory, honestly, especially and nowadays we know that these are there. And there's a lot of talk about them. There's free resources. Definitely look up Monty Cooks. Hold on, I got to get this right. Monty Cooks. There's a free guide to using safety tools. Excellent stuff. But yeah, it's really important because it creates that sense of safety for the group and and for the dungeon master too. Like there's a lot of times when I'm really glad that we went over safety tools ahead of time and made these lines and veils and such for my sake as well, because, you know, we're all playing together.
Yeah, that is true. A lot of times I think when people think about the safety tools, they're always thinking about the dungeon master creating that safe space for players, but you're absolutely correct. The dungeon master is also a part of this and shall also be protected and be able to have their boundaries and be respected in that way as well. Respect your dungeon master. One of the things that you said in that profile also was that a lot of times the players that you're playing are a reflection of yourself. And so it can sometimes be hard for, to separate exactly, the things that happen in game and leaving them in the game. And as opposed to like what's
it feels
happening
like,
in real life.
it's an extension. A lot of especially when you're working with kids, it's an extension of themselves. It's something they've created that they're very passionate about. I mean, adults too.
Right.
I just work a lot more with kids, and I see this firsthand where they're like they've poured their little hearts into this, and then that's why one of my big safety tools. So I could talk about safety tools all day, but and house rules. One of my house rules is no player versus player. We are not allowed to attack each other. We are not allowed to steal from each other. This includes if you guys go do a job and they pay 100 gold. Before I implemented this rule, I'd have kids be like, okay, I take it for myself. And everybody else is like, wait, what? And I'm like, okay, we're not going to do that. And so I started implementing into our session 0 house rules chat. So I could be like, we talked about this. Makes it easier. So no stealing from each other. And there are certain situations, however, where consent comes into it because they might be just being like funny with each other. And they're like, I just want to pop them with a stick for doing this thing, and I have to read the table, and it's like, okay, well, as long as there's no damage and things like that, and there is enthusiastic consent to this, the other player will be like, absolutely, this will be hilarious. Like, do this thing. And it's like, okay, let's roll for it. But if the other player's like, I guess, it's like, oh, nope, that was not enthusiastic consent. And we go with the basis of no. Like, it's no unless it's enthusiastic. So that's one of those big important parts for me.
That's really interesting. So consent versus enthusiastic consent, because I see how kids might feel a little bit pressured to go along with something. Like, okay,
they don't want to be pushing it. And it's not one of those things where you point it out either like, oh, you were not enthusiastic, so we're not going to do this. I'm feeling it out. And then I, as the dungeon master, I'm like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. Let's not do it. Let's try this instead. And then redirect the attention really dramatically, very quickly.
Oh my God. I can feel the relief that from the player to hear the dungeon master be like, nah, I'm not feeling it. You're taking that.
You take the responsibility of the decision. And then, that's exactly.
That's amazing. And the topic of consent in general is outside of a D&D game is an important one. And that is hopefully when things that they are learning about their D&D party and about consent in game is going to follow them into their real life
into adulthood. They're going to be like, wait, I remember that's consent unless enthusiastically given is a no. It's like,
that is not enthusiastic. Love it. So just curious, because you do work a lot with kids, and when they're creating their characters, do you notice that they tend to gravitate towards creating characters that embody a lot of themselves, or are they the opposite? Are they just like, I'm going to be someone totally, totally different?
It's what I've noticed with kids, it's an extension of them. What I've noticed is it's an extension of them in a bigger, more grand way. Like, I am this big masculine fighter character, and I can do all these amazing things. Or I have this one kid who loves to play detectives, like Sherlock Holmes style. Did every campaign this kid has done with me. They're like, I can see everything. I understand it all. I'm good at solving puzzles. And so it's like, I can see that these are the things they're wanting. Whereas when I work with adults, it's usually like, well, this is the wacky side of this part of my personality, and I'm going to channel it into a character and go wild with it.
Yeah.
So
I could see that. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Okay. So one of the other, I'm just keep referencing this profile, which was really rather, they're short bits of content, but they're jam-packed with good information. But one of the things you talked about was this concept of group backgrounds and how that can lead to creating more cohesion among the group and safe spaces. But I need to know more about what this means. What are group backgrounds?
Absolutely. So when you come to a new campaign, you come with a character, and most of the time, at least with the groups I work with, they also come with pages of backstory for this character. Really well thought out stuff.
They just are inspired to create that.
They're so excited. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Just and so I get these like pages of backgrounds to work with and things like that for going forward into the campaign. But what I like to do is, because it's very important to me that our group is immediately a team. That's why, no player versus player. We need to be a team. We need to work together. I can't have you coming in here like, I'm a rogue and I don't want to talk to anybody. It's like, how can we do that in a way where we're still being good team members, like Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, who's a rogue, has his own agenda, but still is a great team player.
Right.
And so the group background thing, it helps mesh them together. It's like, okay, so this is what I'm hearing about you. This is what I'm hearing about you. How can we bring you guys together? What is, tell me about a quest that you two or you three, went on together previously. And then they're like, we didn't. It's like, no. Like, we're making it up right now. Like, tell me, we're going to talk about right now. Let's make up a story. What did you save that manticore kitten from a tree together? That's amazing. Tell me about it. Things like that. So creating that group background separate from just coming in and this is me and my story. It's like, how are we making our story going into this? And it doesn't have to immediately be from session 1. I like to try and put in those hooks in session 1, session 0, more like. Sometimes I can't have a whole session 0. So it's like a discussion as part of session 1. So it's like, how can we go forward immediately with some group background so that you guys you already know each other. Mm-hmm. You already appreciate each other, but you can do it going forward too. So I run a Gender Bent Curse of Strahd campaign, and 2 of my characters, they're both from the 9 Hells. And so they're like, oh, okay, now we grew up best friends. Done. Okay, that is part of it. 2 of my other players in the campaign, we're 10 sessions in, and they've just decided, I think we might be from the same domain in Ravenloft, and we didn't know it until it's like, let's dig into that a little, shall we?
Nice.
So it can be ongoing.
And having those connections with the other players obviously also helps build trust, which then helps create that safe space that is so important. I had a dungeon master, like the second dungeon master I ever had, did that, asked us all to figure out how we knew at least one other party member. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. Like instant connection. Like we are already friends. We are already bonded. And I just our characters were very, very, close in the game, and it helped us as a party of real people become closer in real life too. So
it breaks the ice.
It really does. Yeah. And just the way that you're asking those questions, like, tell me about a time that you guys had this little adventure. Like you're also easing them into the role playing part, which can also be really scary for people. So, I mean, again, it's just all laying that groundwork, which is amazing. I love it. So cool. You also mentioned the yes and approach, which is a tool that most dungeon masters do like to keep in their toolbox. But how do you use that also to create safe spaces?
So that is, and I referenced a lot working with kids because that's what I do. But I noticed there's a big difference with this particular thing when working with adults and working with kids. When I'm working with my adult players, one of them will be like, I'm going to do this thing. And the other players are like, ooh, I'm going to quiet down for a minute and we're going to see what happens there. And this is going to be wild. With kids, this is a really, really big thing. Somebody will say like, oh, I'm going to go do this. And another kid almost always jumps in. No, don't do that. Do it this way. That's not smart. Do it this way. And it's like, ooh, oof. Ooh.
Right.
Ooh. So as part of session 0, so that rather than having to explain in the moment, oh, we don't talk to each other that way. We use the spirit of yes and things like that. I try to cover that in the session 0. So all I have to do is go, yes and. And they're like, oh, sorry. And then they kind of fix it themselves. But, don't, I like to use a show, don't tell type of thing with this. If we're adding on to the yes and the no but thing, like, hey, I'm going to open this door, rather than as the player saying, no, don't do that. That's not smart. You need to check for traps, things like that. It's like, no. they are opening the door. As a character, you can say, hey, buddy, let's check for traps real quick.
Right.
Or you can say, while they're going to open the door, can I do a quick perception check to look for traps? Things like that, like adding on to the situation instead of shutting it down. Because sometimes with kids, especially, they come in and they're nervous to talk. Even if they want to be there, they're nervous to speak up and they're nervous to do things. And a lot of times I've got kids that aren't even necessarily there because they chose to be there, but their parents are like, hey, this is good for you. You're going to try it. And so they're like, that extra reluctance. And then when they finally speak up, to have somebody be like, no, it's like, no, this is a safe space. Our ideas are all valid. We're going to add on to them instead of taking them away.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And I always talk about this too. Like, I feel super intimidated in games, even when I'm playing with my friends sometimes, that like, I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to open a door and it's blatantly like riddled with traps. And I just didn't see it because me, the player in real life, just forgets to do those things. So I like the idea of encouraging the party to, in game add on to the action that may be taking place, or like assisting, like, oh, I'm going to jump into this conversation and I'm going to, instead of telling the player how to do it. That's a really important distinction, because I would feel terrible if the people I was playing with were like, Shelly, there's probably a trap. Oh no, she's going to trigger a trap. As opposed to like, I'm going to sneak up behind her and like just look over her shoulder and make sure there's no traps.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Yes. Big important distinction there for sure. I tend to even play characters now that like are just kind of like flighty, impetuous, like that are just prone to making bad decisions, because one, it's actually really fun to play a character like that. But two, like, if I do mess something up, it's like, of course the character would have done that. That's who she is. I mean, come on. You can't expect her to like actually sweet talk a guard. She's just going to walk in. Because I don't want to talk to the guard. But anyway, so the other thing that I was impressed and appreciated that you do in your games is that you make a point of incorporating diverse characters and introduce them as NPCs throughout the game. You mentioned if you play with, are your groups, do you have groups that are all male?
I do.
Okay, so like introducing strong female characters into the
Incidentally,
games.
my all male groups are in my like Gender Bent Curse of Strahd campaign, where it's like
Really?
80% women. Oh yeah. So I'm like, hey, cool.
Amazing.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think it's really important to, I again, like the safety tool, I think it's mandatory to make sure your NPCs are diverse.
Right.
I mean, and it doesn't have to be like some big thing. They're just a character and you just describe them real quick. Hey, this is what they look like. This is, if they use like a wheelchair, you see their chair, and then they're like an NPC, like every other NPC. They just happen to be different than the people you're playing with, or use different tools. I think that people make a really big deal out of diversity in games. It's like, it's not.
It shouldn't
you put it in. It's like you don't use like caricaturized voices or things like that. Like don't do that. Just add diverse characters.
And you shouldn't make a point of being like, and now the boss comes in and she's a woman and she is very strong and very powerful. Like, no, it's just like, okay, so like their boss comes in and she's her name is this, and if there's any distinguishing characteristics that are important for the players to know, say that. But I always find myself, like, especially I have an 8-year-old boy, and I'm always like, I would find myself a lot of the times trying to like put like, no, like look at these strong women characters, and like play with your Harley Quinn action figure and not just, whatever. But he actually does have a Harley Quinn action figure and he loves her and he does play with her a lot. But I was finding myself being like too overt where it was coming off like disingenuous or like I was like, the way I was putting these things in front of him was making it too obvious that they were different, like.
Yeah, just make it a normal part of the system.
Yeah,
this is just it now.
Now you have like a collection of action figures and half of them are female. Great. Cool. No bigs. Like it'll just become inherent. So
exactly.
But like doing that in your games as well, I think is super cool. And then the world building. So is this also something that you involve your characters in? Is that part of creating their backstories?
So world building happens as we go.
Okay.
Like if we're playing an already established game with an already established world, I mean, it's there. But as we're moving forward, this just happened last night. I think there was some world building together. And it's not necessarily the world itself. It's like collaborative storytelling that makes the story unique to the group. So we move forward and they'll have an idea or they'll think of something. I'm going to give two examples. So the first one happened last night. My players were, this was my streaming game. They went to kill this baddie and they're like, I'm going to do the sword thing and I'd like to like cut off their head. And I'm like, well, they're not dead yet, so that's not going to work. And then I was like, no. We're gonna world build this together. It's like, okay, you do, and its headless body keeps like moving towards you for the next attack. It's like, okay, so now we've got this creature in this world now that can do that. Maybe it's a reborn or something like that. But we just built that together. It's our story because they were like, yeah, do it.
Oh, I love it.
Rolling with that. Or a few days ago, we're at the end of a Lost Mine of Phandelver campaign, and these kids were, running through the forest to try and find this mine with Gundren, the dwarf, and they had just dealt with a changeling a little bit ago. And as they're walking along and chatting, they're like, what if Gundren is like one of these shapeshifters? And I'm sitting there to myself and I'm like, well, he's not. But then they started getting so excited about it and talking about it. And they're like, yeah, because he did this and he did this and this happened. And I was like, those are really good points. You guys picked. Oh, so I'm like sitting over here and I'm like, okay, he's a shapeshifter now. Okay. So then they went in for it and they're like, okay, we're going to interrogate him about it. We're going to go after it. And so I was like, okay, he steals your key and he runs off and they're like, no, go get him.
That's so cool.
Like, in that moment, we changed the world and the story together. Because they were just so excited. I was like, how could I not lean into that?
No, that's amazing. And I like that you also validated that, like empowered them, like made them feel like, yeah, the knowledge that you picked up on, like you sussed it out, kids. Like
even though I didn't pick up on that because I don't plan that well. They imagined the scenario and it felt really good to them. And I was like, it's on.
That is brilliant. All right, one of my last questions, and then if there's anything that you want to add, we can certainly do that. But when you're playing with lots of different personalities, different people, because obviously, like we've talked about, some of them are going to be more comfortable with role playing and with wanting to be more like part of the story than other people. But how do you what do you do if you notice like a player's maybe a little quieter or is seeming to be a little bit intimidated by the action? How do you help bring that person more to the forefront?
So there's a few ways to approach that. I haven't experienced it with my adult groups yet because everybody in those groups I play with a lot of bards, I think.
Oh, definitely not a problem there.
But my kids, so I have to take everything into account. Sometimes a parent will message me and they'll say, hey, my kid is joining. They are nonverbal. They want to just sit in and they want their character to be here. They created a character and they want it to be there and they want to watch the story and just be on Zoom with other kids, but they're not going to actually involve themselves, and they're going to feel really bad if you try to force it. And I'm like, okay.
Absolutely.
So, I will say at least 2 of those kids that were put in my groups like that started talking and interacting with the groups fully by session 5 or 6. Just throwing that out there. Absolutely wild. Yeah.
Did they take that outside of the game as well? Were they more talkative?
Well, because these kids, they were verbal at home, but not at school.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were talking in our sessions, and I know one of the parents reached out and was like, hey, they're starting to talk more like in their classroom and stuff as well. And I'm like, oh my God, D&D is beautiful. It's so therapeutic.
Oh my God.
But until that moment comes, it's like, I'm not going to pressure you, but I'm going to make sure that your character still gets some spotlight. So I kind of I'll play them a little bit like an NPC. Hey, your baby dragon character does this thing. Do you like that? And they're like, yeah, go for it.
Oh, cool.
Whereas other kids, they're in there and they're just feeling a little more shy. I try not to do like the random calling on them if I feel like they've got that anxiety.
Yeah.
Some kids, they're like, I'll call on them, I'll feel it out, and they jump in as soon as they feel like they have that permission.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can do that with you. So I keep track of that. Other kids are like, and I'm like, you know what? Never mind. Switch subjects, and then I know that they don't like that. And so I try to use a different approach, kind of like using in situations where, I want to make sure everybody's getting involved. I'll use more like initiative mode outside of combat, where it's like, I will be calling on you after this amount of time. And that seems to be like the winner because they've got that time to prep. It's not just a random, oh, hey, you. And they're like, ah.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of like the surprise, like, oh, I don't know when the spotlight's going to shift to me. I can see that would be a little bit scary. But yeah, knowing when your turn is coming.
Yeah. And then they still, it's hey, what do you want to do here? And they're like, I don't know. It's like, totally fine. Do you want me to come back to you? Yeah. Come back to me. It's like, okay.
Do you ever narrow it down and give them like, do you want to do this or this or that? Does
absolutely. Because a lot of times they'll be like, I don't know what I can do here. It's like, okay, well, trying to think of an example, they're about to fight a baddie. It's like, okay, well, you can jump in if you want to start initiative. You could try to sneak out this way and go look for more clues. You could, like whatever the situation is, I try to give them at least 3 options of what to do. And I'll be like, and if you don't like any of those options, I mean, if you have any random idea, no idea is stupid. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Throw it out there, even if it's not even part of the rules. Like, let's chat.
Yeah, that's exciting for a dungeon master. Let's see what we can do. I also noticed that you tend to ask questions that make like when they do an action, you ask them the questions about, well, what does that look like? Yes. What does the other party see? And I love that. That's a tactic that Greg Tito did when he was DMing for myself and some new people, and that he was, doing that as a way to help them get into like the role play part of it. But I've been playing spellcasters for years and nobody has ever asked me what it looks like when I cast a fireball or something. And it was so cool. Yeah.
Like my fire is green, just so everybody knows. Ooh.
Just so you know. Yeah. Like what does it look like when you cast Burning Hands?
Oh no, I have a toddler running.
Oh, hi. It happens all the time. I usually have one. He's at the doctor right now. Otherwise he would be here too. Not a toddler though. Oh. Well, I mean, that's probably a good spot for us to start wrapping up. Do you have any other tips for dungeon masters on cohesion and safe spaces and making players feel included? There's so much good stuff here. But I know you took notes.
Just being really receptive to what they're talking about. What they're wanting to do. You can, as a dungeon master, you have access to your players' character sheets. And most of the time, they also give you access to their backstory information, separate in a Word document or something.
Yeah.
And just sitting down and trying to find ways that they might not be able to see this like teamwork connection or things like that, and kind of helping weave those threads and then bringing that up in session or connecting them into the story in those ways as well, because once something from their backstory or things like that comes up in session, they're more invested, and then if it also is connected to this character, they're more invested, and then they're like, oh, we've got this thing that we got to work together on, and
yeah I see it. Amazing. I would love to have you come back and talk more about being a therapeutic dungeon master and the work that you do with kids, but we'll save that for another time. In the meantime, where can people find you and learn more about the work that you do and what other projects that you have? And I mean, who does not want this feminist reimagining of Curse of Strahd? So we definitely need to plug that as well.
So yeah, you can find me anywhere at It's Beth the Bard. So like on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of the socials. I think there's so many socials, but it's the same one for all of them. And then I also have a website that's just beththebard.com, where I'm trying to keep everything organized in one spot for easy reference and collaboration. I love collaborating with people. So like reach out to me. Just do it.
Awesome. Well, hopefully people will, because you have a lot of great experience and great advice, and just you're hugely talented. So I am excited to have you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be my guest here and help inspire other dungeon masters.
Thanks again for having me.
Anytime. And I mean that. Anytime.
So many great ideas and guidelines and just, important things to have in your brain when you're running a game.
Yes. And I love this segment because I just really like to talk to wonderfully creative, talented people that are doing great things with D&D.
You know what's so funny is that
making it better.
When we were writing the book around Dragon Talk, Welcome to Dragon Talk, which we turned in, mostly done-ish, over the week or so.
Yeah.
But a lot of those segments just really came from the two of us just wanting to know more about specific topics. Like that's why we do it.
I think that's even what I said when I was writing about how to be a DM. It's like, it's totally self-serving.
Yeah.
I'm the one asking that question.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so cool to just meet new people and find out how they're using D&D and just what they're doing with it and all the cool things. I love it.
And we've got an amazing adventure, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which Ari Levitch is going to tell us all how we can use that in new and exciting ways. So
I can't wait.
Jump in and roll some diggity dice. Everyone, let's welcome Ari Levitch to Dragon Talk.
Yay, Ari!
Hello, all.
Oh, woo, 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 woo.
Very excited to have you here, Mr. Levitch.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
Very excited to talk about Witchlight, which I didn't realize until just saying this out loud. It kind of is rhyming of your name. Mr. Levitch and Witchlight. Mr. Witch, Mr. Light.
Levitch,
of a kind, I suppose. Yeah, all right.
Is that why you were working on this?
I was very insistent that I worked on this for that very reason.
Well, it worked. It's working. We are
Sold.
glad. I am obsessed with The Wild Beyond the Witchlight.
That's good.
I
guess.
fully am. 100%. I'm in.
All right. So then we're done. Like my whole job was to make sure that Shelley was into this. So.
Yep, and it worked. I remember hearing about it like well over a year ago, whenever it was in the works. I'm like, that sounds like that could be right up my alley. And it is. I love all of the themes. And 8 is my favorite number. And I know that's a theme. Is it really?
Yeah, it was always my number when I was able to choose a number for baseball or basketball. I always chose 8.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Is there a reason? Is there a reason for 8?
I think it was like I just liked the infinity symbol-ishness of it. Like if you turn it on its side, it was the infinity symbol. There's a REM song called Driver 8 that I just got in my head for being young at that time. And because it's an important number in the Feywild.
And that's why, most importantly.
Particularly in the domain of Delight Prismeer. Because precisely it's its resemblance to the infinity symbol or even an hourglass.
Oh,
Which-
hour
With a code name.
Interesting. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin with this, but
Well, let's
maybe
talk about
we
maybe
can.
Prismeer is a good place to start. What do you think, Shelley?
What?
I mean,
how do you want me to
let's-
jump into this?
First of all, tell us what your role was working on this
Sure.
book.
So I was one of the writers on the book. So I worked with Chris Perkins and Will Doyle and Stacey Allen. We were we wrote the words in the book. So I was
Okay.
one of those folks. And I got to
lucky
do
you.
some like world building ahead of time. I got to work with Adam Lee and Sean Wood, and it was a blast to just spend some time in the Feywild and then create this adventure.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. So, good job, Greg. Good parenting. So Prismeer, I guess we'll just jump into Prismeer because this is, you know what I love about this too is that it's such a different vibe from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Like it's just like a nice palate cleanser once you finish another book that I was obsessed with as well. But Prismeer, very unique, different. But tell us, like, if you were Rick Steves and you were going to encourage us to visit Prismeer, like, what should we know about this beautiful place?
I mean, so first I'll just kind of jump off of what you're talking about with Van Richten's Guide, because Van Richten's Guide talks about, it goes into domains of dread within the Shadowfell. And so it's an interesting thing that you say this is kind of a palate cleanser because Prismeer it takes place in the Feywild, which is a plane that is kind of an opposition that exists in opposition to the Shadowfell. So where the Shadowfell is a gloomy place, kind of devoid of a lot of emotion and all this kind of, and it looks even desaturated in color. The Feywild is the opposite. It is this emotional outpouring of a plane. And instead of domains of dread, like you read about in Van Richten's Guide, there are domains of delight in the Feywild, and these are all kind of emotional expressions of the Archfey, that these powerful Fey beings that created their domains, and Prismeer is one of those domains. And so the Wild Beyond the Witchlight adventure gets to explore that particular domain of delight.
That's so cool.
And yeah.
I love the idea. I mean, because I know reading old D&D editions, and especially things like Planescape, where there was these idea of opposite planes, right? Like there was the plane of water, and then the plane of dust, and then you'd be like they would be in opposition to each other. I feel like that idea is now continuing here with this.
And kind of speaking cosmically, there is the material plane that that would be the equivalent of where we exist. And both the Shadowfell and the Feywild are these kind of very close mirrors of the material plane. And so that you got to explore a little bit of that in Van Richten's Guide, particularly with focusing on the domains of dread. And so, now we get to go to the other side of that, which is the Feywild, and explore one of these domains of delight. Yeah, which is Prismeer.
So the denizens of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, all of that are very uber creepy and, as you were saying, like colorless echoes of things you might find on the material plane. That is true of creatures within the Feywild as well. Like they're more vibrant and full of emotion.
Yeah, and so I'm going to use this comparison a lot because it just helps, especially because people might have already read Van Richten's Guide. So when you have the domains of dread, there's a sense that the dread lords whose domain it is kind of trapped within this, right? They're tormented by things that they might have done in life or kind of cursed in some way. Whereas like the domains of delight are kind of emotional reflections of the Archfey that lives there. And the domain of delight is literally physically shaped by the whims and personality and nature of that Archfey. And then there's a cyclical nature because then the domain itself kind of shapes the Archfey as well. So in some way you can almost, while it's, this place of exuberance and it's this place of kind of raw emotion and kind of whimsy, there is this sense that an archfey also might be kind of beholden to that emotion. And so the sense that this is where some of the kind of sense of danger exists in the Feywild, that you're dealing with this kind of, with these erratic beings who might be able, whose behavior and mood might switch rapidly from one moment to the next. And that is true of the Fey, of Fey beings kind of across the board. There is this whole spectrum of emotion. You could have, rage embodied in Fey creatures called red caps, or you have, fear with like mean locks and things like that. And so there are all these kind of emotions attached to Fey beings, whether it's lowly Fey creatures or the most kind of extravagant archfey.
Oh my God. Okay, so first of all, I feel slightly attacked when you're talking about the way that these Fey creatures can change, or depending on their mood, things change. Because I actually do feel like I might be a little bit Fey in my house.
Does your environment change around you to reflect that?
If I'm not in a good mood, the house is gonna suffer.
The color starts to come away from the paintings.
Yes, like Quinn's action figures slowly start to melt. And
they start to frown.
Oh, I want to make that short film.
I know, right? So they're not, when you say they're beholden to a certain emotions, is it just like wherever you are walking around in Prismeer, it's changing? It can just always change. Like I remember hearing flowers could wilt. Like if the archfey is feeling sad.
This is a Feywild kind of generality, with Prismeer being an example of this. But the Feywild, not just so. Domains of Delight are very much shaped by the Archfey, but the Feywild, the fabric of the Feywild, responds to emotion. So it's not just the Archfey that have that kind of influence over the environment. And so within the Feywild, like you were saying, you might be walking around, but if you are distraught, the environment might reflect that to a degree. Like if you are if you are brooding, or if you're in kind of a bad spot and you're walking along, your footsteps might wither the grass that you're walking upon. But if you're in this kind of jolly mood, like the flowers might, come out and almost appear to be kind of smiling at you and things like that. So like there is this sense of everything is so connected to emotion and expression, emotional expression here, that it's just built into the fabric of the place.
So you could go there with very bad intentions and cause a lot of damage and destruction.
Absolutely. Yeah, again, as whimsical a place as the Feywild is, it's very dangerous. I mean, if you kind of lose yourself in indulgence, or you come across, Fey creatures that are embodiments of those kind of negative emotions. And so there is a sense of danger that exists here that can feel hyperbolic to a degree. It could feel over the top in a way that where the Shadowfell might feel gloomy and might kind of drain you of energy. There's this kind of frenetic quality that might exist in the Feywild, depending on where you are, that kind of keeping up is itself its own danger.
So I'm getting some bipolar comparisons here, right? Where Feywild is the manic episode and the Shadowfell is the depressive episode, right? Like you get, it's one drains and one might be too exuberant.
And there's something to the idea of connecting into, the way humans process information and process emotions. And so there's something that is very identifiable in that way, but at the same time, you're in a place that is not the material plane. So it feels different, but somehow recognizable. And so, I think you're touching on something for sure.
So as adventurers, now I know that there's a lot of rules to how you interact with the Fey inhabitants, lots of etiquette that one must, be somewhat knowledgeable about. Hopefully we learn some of that when we're at the carnival before we get to the Feywild itself. But for us as adventurers who are going to be exploring, it seems like a very difficult, challenging place to be in because of how much your actions and your mood can affect your environment. So are there rules that we should be following when we're in there? Like, just keep smiling.
So
Keep
there
smiling.
are rules, and a lot of it kind of the way those rules are interpreted varies from individual to individual.
Okay.
So this is where it is different from. I think I touched on this a little bit in a previous chat about kind of the etiquette of the Feywild, but the idea of the rules of reciprocity and hospitality and gift giving. These are all things that exist in the Feywild.
Love you.
But the way that those are interpreted, it depends on who you are dealing with and what is important to that particular Fey creature. But these types of etiquette agreements are different from contracts that you might sign, if you're in Avernus. So these aren't kind of letter of the law, minutia, kind of gotcha clauses. These are by interacting in this certain way, by participating in gift giving or being hospitable to a stranger. You are now kind of working within the rules of the Feywild, but it is not a lawful place, generally, the Feywild. There is this chaotic nature to it. And so again, the chaotic part of it comes from how Fey creatures interpret these kind of rules of etiquette. So when you're talking about gift giving and exchanging things of equal value, somebody might give you, you might want like this beautiful gem that a Fey creature has, and you've seen nothing like this in the material plane, and you just want this thing. And what they might want in exchange for it is, are kind of the buttons on the cuffs of your jacket, because they love buttons. You have no idea how much that's worth to them. And so discovering what they want is part of the charm of the Feywild.
Yeah, we went into a lot of detail about that.
I won't belabor that one again.
Which I love.
Is
But I'm
that
glad
up
you're
to
giving an overview here. Definitely go back and look at previous episodes to get that. But I just love, to Shelley's point, like how players, the inciting incident of getting to the Witchlight Carnival is going to be the first kind of foray into learning some of these, hopefully some rules for the players, and so that when they go to Prismeer, they have at least a basis or an idea of what they might be doing something wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, if you are an astute participant in the carnival, there are things that will prepare you for your foray into the Feywild. Yeah, I mean the carnival itself is a fun kind of D&D experience, and it's fun for characters to kind of experience the carnival and experience the attractions and the games that are there. But yeah, if you kind of pay attention, it's also priming the characters, and absolutely.
Okay, good tip. Like maybe you should fill your pockets with all sorts of little trinkets, because you never know, like you said, you never know what they may, the people or the creatures that you encounter along the way might find.
And there are many opportunities to get trinkets unique to this adventure that are Feywild specific.
So,
I love the trinkets.
A question I wanted to know is, what you, the player, when the Witchlight Carnival touches down in your area, do you already know like that's a portal into the Feywild, or is that just something like you as a player just discovers, or is that like a well-known fact?
It's mostly the latter. It's this idea. So it is this, enchanting carnival that shows up every 8 years. It has this kind of beautiful procession of these carriages that are pulled by winged animals, and they kind of land and they set up the entire carnival. You go there and you have a good time. If you have a ticket, then you won't be hassled. Mm-hmm. But yeah, within the Feywild itself, within the carnival itself is a Fey crossing. That there's a way to, wherever the carnival is, there's a way to get to Prismeer through it.
Okay.
And then the dungeon master can choose to have that be like a widely known thing, or that the players might know it ahead of time, but they don't necessarily know that they're going to get going on into adventure. But it's a little bit like Descent into Avernus, when you're like, all right, we're in Baldur's Gate, but we know we're going to get to hell at some point because it's in the title.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, I think the joy of running this adventure is being pretty upfront about this is going to be the Feywild adventure. We're going into the Feywild to do some fun things. Now, the carnival itself can exist independently. That's part of the beauty of how it's written. Is that's not a thing you want to do, and you just want to have the carnival as an aside or something. Or if you want to use it as a springboard for another adventure, you can do that. But for this, if you're like, we're going to be playing, the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Yeah, get ready because you're going to be going into the Feywild.
So, if in theory, does the Witchlight Carnival always lead you to Prismeer?
Yes.
I mean, I know it does for this book, but is it
so
always?
Fey Crossings themselves are the way the material plane and the Feywild kind of exist. Is they're proximal to each other in a cosmic sense, and that means that there are places where the veils between the two planes are thinner, and there are crossings where usually they're kind of like mystical like locations, or like if you go through a ring of standing stones, you might not know that you have stepped from the material plane into the Feywild, but you go through it, and when you leave it, you're in a different place. And it has, there might be a place like the standing stones in the material plane has a mirror in the Feywild. So when you step through, you might not even know you've crossed over. But it might be a circle of mushrooms, or you might go into a cave and exit the cave, and you were in the material plane, and now you're in the Feywild. So that kind of stuff. So they're usually kind of fixed locations that go from one point in the material plane to the Feywild. The carnival is unique in that it travels around, but the crossing always takes you to the Domain of Delight, which is Prismeer.
Cool. So what's the hook for getting people to go into this portal? What is
Mr. Witch just shoves you in there?
Yeah, right. I mean, it could be as simple as that. You could have just tripped and fell in if you got a particularly clumsy character who fails their dexterity check.
Candy.
But what's the inciting incident really for wanting to go in there and find out what's happening?
So there are two different major hooks of the options that you have when you're starting this adventure. And so the DM working with the players can figure out which one kind of best suits, the group. There is one where an old kind of warlock of Zybilna. Zybilna is the archfey of Prismeer. And there's a warlock who has a pact with Zybilna, but hasn't been able to kind of feel Zybilna's presence or contact Zybilna in any way. And so he contacts the players to try to go into Prismeer and discover what's been happening. There's another option where it's assumed that the players or that the characters have been to the carnival before, when the carnival was last when 8 years prior, like before the carnival, 8 years before the carnival has arrived, the carnival had already been to that location. And so this hook assumes that the characters have been to the carnival at that time. Mm-hmm. And while there, they were there without tickets. And if you're there without tickets, something of value can be taken from you. Okay. And so this could be, there's a whole table of what could be taken, but these could be something like, it could be something like your smile or the color of your eyes or something like that.
Oh, I'm like thinking it's like my keychain or my teddy bear. Like, whoa, like really like.
Yeah. So these are things that you have lost, and that you have this kind of tug that you have lost these things. So that hook brings you into the Feywild to recover what you have lost, because you had 8 years to kind of know that thing has been missing and it's been eating at you. So there are these two things there, and or two possible hooks. But a DM can find all sorts of reasons to push somebody into Prismeer.
So I've been, my daughter loves animals and loves, all things D&D for sure. And I've been hinting that, the next adventure is all about the Feywild. There's rabbit folk, there's Harengon, and, fairies. She's always had a fascination with fairies ever since watching Tinkerbell. And then I gave her a small D&D miniature of a fairy that she's lost many times. It always seems to find. So themes here are consistent.
Yeah.
So what would be some good ways in your mind to use this book that would be for a kids campaign?
So one of the great things about the way this was designed, and this is not necessarily like prescriptive in any way, but it was designed where that there are ways to get through each encounter and each obstacle without combat. So if you want to have fun with, I mean, you could always draw your weapons or cast spells or do whatever. That's always an option. But it was designed in a way where if you wanted to play in a campaign that, let's say didn't glorify violence or anything like that, you can absolutely run through it with kids, and you can basically teach creative problem solving, which I think is a fun thing to do. And
Yes.
you could show how much fun that characters can have with fey creatures, with these, bargains, and with these, with just playing up the quirkiness of the Feywild. So I think that's absolutely fun. And there are in one of the locations in Prismeer, you actually meet a group of children as well, who kind of have a tree fort that's built in the boughs of a treant. So it's adorable and it's awesome. So there's a lot of fun things to just interact with for younger players, but also just the idea of D&D isn't necessarily a fighting simulator game, that there are other ways to deal with problems.
So you can like really play up the fairy tale essence of this story for kids.
Yeah, ideally.
You can just like there's things that they'll understand, like fairies. You can be like, you can be a bunny rabbit. Who doesn't want to do that? And like, oh, we're gonna just go to the land where fairies are, which I think is great. But I was kind of interested in the idea of maybe just doing the carnival for like brand new people. And just say like, hey, let's just spend an afternoon at a carnival, guys, and kind of get their feet wet that way. What do you think?
And that's really great. I mean, if it's a way to familiarize people with their character sheets in kind of in a low stakes kind of setting, and it is also just a fun one shot. It's just this is the kind of this could be downtime between adventures if you wanted to kind of drop in the carnival, or you can just have it as a one shot with people who have never played before, just to explain the idea of what role playing is. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I love that idea too of just, I mean, going back to the example of my daughter, we played, I think 3 sessions or 4 sessions of a Frost Maiden campaign. And then, life gets in the way and various scheduling monsters are unable to be slain. But now I just love the idea of just being like, all right, well, you still have those same characters. We don't need to roll up new ones.
Yeah.
And here comes a carnival. It's popped up in the middle of the Ice Age that, you can solve that later, maybe.
Which is an amazing thing. You could even imagine, like, if you're dropping it in the middle of 10 towns and, the ground is all icy, but where the carnival is, it is this idyllic, beautiful place where, the grass is green there and there's flowing water. It's not all frozen over. And it is just a reprieve from the repressive winter that's there. And just sometimes players need that kind of release valve of just like, this tension's been too high for weeks and we just need that. And so it could be just a way to just, we're going to the carnival today. That's what we're doing.
Well, I love the idea too of the denizens of 10 towns going to this carnival and then being like, nope, we're not going back. We're staying in this carnival.
Oh, yeah, I would just go
that's
right.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes, just get a job, become a witchlight hand, and just travel along with it. Yes, it's just that's one of the things I loved about the carnival too, is that even if you don't play in the Feywild part, but just surprise your players in any campaign, and just bloop, oh, guess what? There's a carnival. Let's go play some games. And I also love that there's rules for the carnival games as well.
Yeah. So the carnival itself, it has attractions where you can go and watch giant snail races, and you can participate in, there are kind of giant dragonfly rides, or, you can do these kind of attractions, but there are also a bunch of carnival games. So you can do things like you could participate in a gnome poetry contest, or you can try to outstare this illusory cyclops. And so there are all sorts of fun ways to just participate individually, or you can do these as a group, and you could have a fun time that way.
I've noticed that Twitter is just a buzz, and by a buzz I mean like two people, who have noticed that there is a very special snail in the story named Shelly Moo.
Are you one of the two people?
Okay, so three people.
That is true. That is correct.
Yes, very much. I appreciate that. I'm assuming it's not just a coincidence that there's Shelly Moo the snail. I'm going to just say that there's not. But I also love that Shelly Moo is the pink team because, of course, that would be my team. So put your money on Shelly Moo.
Seeing the delight on Chris Perkins' face with when that was in the list of snails, it was wonderful.
It's a good snail name, Shelly. Get it?
My daughter's also
right
named
now.
a turtle. A turtle stuffy is named Shelly in our house.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good
cool.
stuff.
Anyway, that's one of my favorite things. Another reason why I love this book. So, Ari, if you were to go into the Feywild, which Fey guide would you choose to escort you? Or maybe you would just be like, no, I'm just going on my own. I'm winging it.
So the adventure features 3 Fey guides, but you could also, if you want to create your own Fey guides, you can do that. You could create whatever any type of creature you want to be a Fey guide, and it's usually a good idea to have one.
That was my other question. I'm assuming we would want a Fey guide.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you can convince one or kind of do the right favor for a guide who can then help you get from place to place, that is usually a prudent move in the Feywild. And so I'm a little bit biased because the guide I got to write is a little scarecrow named Clapperclaw.
Yes.
And Clapperclaw has these like steel lobster-like claws and has a gourd for a head that is filled with coins. And Clapperclaw can talk. I don't know exactly how, except I could say it's magical. But the gourd is not Clapperclaw's original head. And if you could help Clapperclaw find his head, then you'll be more inclined to help guide you from place to place.
Okay.
Didn't the last time we had a guide was I think Tomb of Annihilation, where I think when we played in that internal game, wasn't there like a reality competition to find out who was going to be our guide? I like the idea of running something like that, right? Where there's 3 or 4 of them available to the party, and then they get to choose who is their favorite.
Oh, that's great. I like that a good deal. Because what that shows, if you can get into that kind of a place in the Feywild, it shows that your characters have achieved some sort of like confidence or mastery over the rules here and the etiquette here. So like that's part of the joy, is like seeing characters get to that, like, oh, I get it here. I understand how I'm supposed to navigate this place. There's just kind of like when you first get there might be this Alice in Wonderland-y vibe to it of just you are from a different place, and it is very clear based on the behavior of everyone around you. But yeah, if you can get to that point where you're interacting with a bunch of potential guides and you can choose one, and that's a pretty fun way to do it.
You mentioned travel too. Like how does travel work within the Feywild? Is it analogous to material world travel, or is it the type of thing where it can go really fast or go really slow depending on the mood of the travelers? Like, how plastic is that?
Travel is weirder in the Feywild than on the material plane. So on the material plane, you travel, you can look at a map, you can say it's this many miles or whatever, it'll take this many days to get there. The Feywild is a little bit different. Traveling on a road to a distant location isn't necessarily straightforward. It might, like, the road might change based on mood, based on other magical phenomena, and it's not so straightforward. Sometimes there are magical barriers between places. So, there are multiple domains of delight. I mean, there are tons of domains of delight, and that are not mappable. The locations those domains can kind of grow and shrink depending on the power of the Archfey. And it's almost like this moving patchwork of domains of delight. And not every place in the Feywild is even incorporated into one of these domains. So it is this kind of nebulous place, but there are things you can do to travel. You could travel overland, and if all the conditions you've met all the conditions, you can get there. But there are also shortcuts that could exist that exist once you're in the Feywild. And these are kind of magical rituals that might help you get from place to place. So for example, if I'm whistling a tune and I walk around, this tree stump counterclockwise, it might be able to, that act of doing that might take me from one location to another location within the Feywild itself. And each of these little shortcuts have their own rituals. And so a DM can have a ton of fun creating these shortcuts as well.
And then giving clues so that they could discover
exactly
it, right? And how that works, and trial and error. And we ended up in the wrong place. Now we have a whole other part of the adventure that we have to deal with.
Yep. Or who knows? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a
shortcut.
good DM trick. If you're just like, I got to get him out of here, and just let's go, let's move on. Chop
They
chop,
go to
guys.
Avernus all of a sudden.
Yes.
Yep.
That's awesome. This is going to be embarrassing, but I just watched the film Legend by Ridley Scott for the first time last night. I'd seen parts of it, clips, never really all the way through. And I was struck by how similar it is to how we're describing the wild beyond the Witchlight here. Especially that unicorns, having those unicorns prancing in shot in beautiful Ridley Scott style.
Yep.
I was like, man, this is how I'm thinking of the Feywild now.
That's great. Yeah. I actually haven't seen that since I was a kid. But I know the scene. So yeah, that is fast. Now I want to watch this again. I have my own homework. But yeah,
it's worth it. It's worth it for those of you who are thinking about visuals, for sure. Because everybody's a little bit sparkly. Like Tom Cruise has got some sparkliness to him. Because he's a vampire, I think, right? That's how that works.
Oh gosh.
Or no, we're mixing IPs
You're
again.
mixing your movies. Yep. Should we talk a little bit about the different areas of Prismeer?
Sure. Yeah, we could jump into the different areas. So Prismeer, as we talked about before, has an archfey, and that archfey is Zybilna. Now, Zybilna is not, or at the outset of this adventure, Zybilna is kind of missing.
Uh-oh.
And so in Zybilna's absence, the domain has been carved up into kind of three smaller kind of mini Fey realms. There's Hither, Thither, and Yon. And so Hither is this dank, swampy, marshy landscape. And I guess let me ask you this. What do you want to know about these places? Because I can go down some rabbit holes here. Yeah.
I like having those broad strokes.
Yeah, just real broad, how they kind of are similar or different from each other.
Yeah, okay. They're very visually distinct, and there are themes that play out here. So we talked about the idea of there are hags. Okay, let me back up. So in Zybilna's absence, the three kind of splinter realms that now exist within Prismeer are each run by a hag of the Hourglass Coven. And so you have Hither, which is this, as I mentioned before, it's this kind of immense swampy area. It has these kind of these waters that kind of rise and fall. So you have this added danger of whether or not you're going to get stuck in mud, or you're going to get, you have to navigate these kind of high waters. And that's where you can encounter Harengon brigands. And this is where we see them as things you can interact with for the first time. And then you have Thither, which is this kind of enormous forest, and it is kind of like this ancient primeval forest that's there. And the hag that sees there's a hag that oversees that one as well, and that is the I guess I'm not sure if I should actually get into who the hags are. You know what? I'm not going to, because it is fun to discover.
But so yeah, you have a little bit about them in the in our previews, but
right. Okay. So yeah, you have the hag there. So Okay, I'm bouncing all over the place because I'm excited.
I'll let you go
But-
to the next one and talk about what
Okay.
Yon feels like.
Okay, so Yon has all of these kind of jagged, dramatic mountains, and it has these brooding storm clouds overhead. They're always kind of releasing, lightning, and there's all these, booms of thunder and arcing electricity with these huge pylons that kind of jut up from the from the mountaintops. And all that lightning is then directed to this enormous amphitheater that exists in within Yon. And then in the center of all of it is Zybilna's palace. And so that is the whole domain of delight kind of radiates out from this central location.
That's awesome. I love how those names kind of map to past, present, and future. Is that kind of it?
That is precisely it. So hither is basically is the place of the present. Thither is the place of the past, and then Yon is the place of the future.
All that with the time and everything, it seems so
Yes.
cool. Hourglass, the figure 8 of everything. It's so cool.
The number 3.
Right? Yeah. Well, what's the number 3 have to do with it?
So 3, you have the 3 members of the Hourglass Coven. And visually, if you take a 3 and then its reflection and you put them together, you get an 8. So there are all these kinds of visual symbols and themes that kind of play out through the adventure as well.
So cool. And these come to life. These little parts, I've been lucky enough to see some of the maps that are included in The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. And I love how these show off the vibrancy and color of this domain of delight.
Yeah, I just want to really compliment Stacey Allen and Will Doyle on their. Not only did they write, a good chunk of the book, but they did the maps here, and they did those maps, and they are amazing. I am so pleased with how they turned out. They always put a smile on my face.
They are amazing. There's so much to discover on those maps, and they're just people just audibly gasp when they see them for the first time. They're that good.
For sure. I mean, maybe I'm shilling Shelley and I's book so far, but there's one essay about maps that I feel like they are magical items. Like they are portals to other worlds, and that's on display here in this book for sure.
It's so strange how evocative a map can be. Illustrations are evocative in a different way, but the idea of seeing a place on a map and saying, I want to go to that place, it is, like you said, it's magical. There's something special about a map.
And the map of the Witchlight Carnival, I just want to call that out too, because I definitely have a picture of what that looks and feels like, way more than, the 20 or so odd pages that are describing it in text form.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have a visual now, and that cements everything for me.
And the map itself is, it shows, the layout of the carnival, but it's also an in-game tool, because there are parts of the map that you use to track time and also to track the mood, the general mood of the people within the carnival. And so, the map was designed to be evocative, but show locations, but also be an in-game tool. It's wonderful.
And people watching it might notice a pattern of an 8, perhaps.
Maybe. The carnival. Well, actually, no, I want to talk about this a little bit about the story tracker, because that kind of talks about something else that I thought was really cool with this, is that there is some additional guidance for maybe some newer dungeon masters who might be discovering or going behind the screen for their first time.
And that's part of the thing, like with D&D, right? Like there's this kind of mystery to DMing until you've done it. And so with our books, we're always trying new things to make a DM's life a little bit easier and kind of make that first step a little less scary. And so one of the things we included this time around was a story tracker. It's essentially it's a sheet of paper that has relevant adventure information and who kind of has interacted with it, which characters have interacted with it, where certain things are in the world. And it's just very much basically like a best practices guide for running an adventure. And it just basically, helps you keep a lot of relevant information kind of at your fingertips at all time. And in addition to that, we're also trying out this thing where a lot of the NPCs have these cards in the back of the book in one of the appendices, where it basically has a lot of role-playing information there. So if you have those cards, or if you print that out and you have those when you're going to be running a session with those NPCs, then it just makes that, it makes running them a little bit easier.
Yeah, the cards are super cool. I'm looking at them right now.
And we also mentioned the Heron Gone, and I read a little bit in a preview that is out in the wild right now. So go check it out. But I believe that it was your reaction to some imagery that is the reason why Heron Gone are in this book. Is that right?
Yeah. So the initial inspiration for Heron Gons, and particularly the Heron Gone brigands that then show up in the adventure, is medieval manuscripts have these little, drawings or paintings in the margins of religious texts, and this is called marginalia. And a lot of them, an odd number of them, I suppose, feature rabbit folk like holding weapons like clubs or swords or whatever, and just harassing monks or fighting. Sometimes they're fighting like almost like anthropomorphic hounds, or they might be jousting from the back of a snail. It is weird. But you get the sense that they are kind of a cruel and brutal bunch. And so it was from that I was like, I need to encounter these brigands on the road. Like, that is the thing, that is an experience I want to write into an adventure. And from there, the idea kind of then kind of expanded into, well, what if we were able to play as one of these Heron Gons? And the idea that, not the idea of expressing Heron Gons as a playable race, kind of just made it into the book. And I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I want to play with a group that is like an Oops All Heron Gons group, and we're all kind of all these rabbit folk, and we're in the Feywild doing whatever. So,
I love that. What if they're all?
I would be in that group.
No, we're gonna have to do it.
So one of the things about them I noticed is it says Heron Gons are blessed with a little fey luck. Is that like supposed to be like a joke about a rabbit's foot being lucky?
Is that how you interpreted it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, everything is intentional.
Well, then they should be very lucky.
Yeah. I thought it was a play on rabbits tend to get lucky pretty often.
Yes, it could be that. I guess that could be it too.
It's awesome.
All of the above. Yep.
D&D is whatever you want it to be, Greg.
Right? And with each, like every player character, you can have, a Bugs Bunny type of Heron Gone. You can have...
I'm thinking like Watership Down.
The Watership Down. You can have a Fiver who's like a, priest of divination who is, no, things are happening. The sky is falling.
Yep.
And then gets killed by a Warforged. I think that's how that works, right?
Aww. Or you can play, I would play like an Usagi Yojimbo character.
Yeah.
A ton of fun. Yeah.
So fun.
We got lots of inspiration there. Definitely. And of course, fairies. Who doesn't want to play a fairy? That's going to be real popular.
Yep. Yeah, I'm stoked to do that too. Like, there's so much fun you can do. And it's interesting to play as characters who are associated with the Feywild, because what is their story, right? How what brought them to the material plane, and then they're going back to the Feywild? Is that something they're reticent about, or is that something they're excited? Like, there's a lot of stories you get to tell if you are starting as one of those characters.
Yeah, and I think that the same is true also for the Feylost background.
Yeah,
and I got super sad hearing Chris talk about that for some reason. I'm like, I don't want to be a Feylost now. I thought it was like, oh, that's cool. Like, there's great stories there. Like, I just ran away and went to the Feywild. But it's like, I don't know. Like, the way he described it was very melancholy, and now I don't know if I want to be.
And that is a thing. Like, when you talk about when you hear about the land of fairy in folklore, there is this sense of people, people who have been there or kind of fell into this magical sleep, and then when they woke up and things are different, or they left part of themselves in the Feywild, there is this weird thing that if you have been to the Feywild, that when you leave it and you return to the material plane, that things don't seem as vibrant, right? Like you are leaving this place that is, for all of its kind of chaotic nature, there is this absolute beauty to it. And, when you step out of that, there is that sense like, oh, okay, I guess I'm back in the world, and I got to deal with my worldly things and my worldly problems. And so there is something about that, but that is melancholy. But that's where good stories are.
It is. I think it's definitely ripe with like good backstory. Like, why are you here?
Brigadoon.
Yeah. And like also, I'm just still thinking about the idea of going to the carnival without a ticket and then having something taken from you. And then just being a character completely outside of this adventure, just anywhere, but like just knowing like, well, that's part of my background and that's why my eyes are blank or whatever.
Yeah. And that's
why I can't smile.
Even treat it. Yeah. You can treat it as a side quest to recover that. So you can go as deep into the Feywild as you want. That's part of the beauty of how this is set up. Or you can run through the adventure as it's written. Like there's so many. I think it works on that level. Yeah.
So much good stuff.
I want to talk a little bit about a property from the 80s that involved going through a portal and then having the party members be transformed by that event. And it's something you said around, the Harengon or even the fairies or whatever, but how cool it would be to play maybe as your real selves, and then you get going to the Witchlight Carnival, and then you get transformed into something else when you're in the Feywild, and then having to deal with that, right? Having to deal with the transformation that comes from going through that portal, a la the D&D cartoon.
And I hadn't even considered that idea. I mean, D&D itself could be such a wide umbrella in terms of how you play it. And the idea of going from, I think I've said this before in other places, but this is how it helped me think of the Feywild, where like D&D is a magical place compared to our real world, right? And so when we were thinking about the Feywild, we had to, what is the fantasy place compared to the D&D material like plane? So it's like we had to think about that. So the idea of then, okay, take out that middle element, and it's just like we're going from our mundane world into the Feywild, like that could be bonkers. Like that could be a ton of fun, especially if somebody who's never role played before, or they don't know fantasy very well. The idea of, what a warlock is or a cleric might be a little bit nebulous. But if you say, yes, you are going into this fantastical world, might be an interesting way to bring someone into what fantasy even is. I hadn't even thought about that.
I didn't either until just now. So now I'm totally going to run it that way for my kids, I think, and see how they deal with being their 10-year-old selves and 8-year-old selves being, a Harengon and a Bullywug or something.
Oh, that's cute.
Great.
They would love
but
that.
I also love the idea of bringing back some of those older, 1980s characters. If anybody had any of the action figures from way back in the day, I know Bart's got a few of Warduke.
Still has them.
Yep.
Yes.
Those characters appear in this adventure, or can appear if DM wants to use it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the fun things. We got to see the artist Darkin reimagine those characters, and he did such an awesome job. And it's just fun to see them in the book. It's fun to see stat blocks for these characters, like really interacting with them in a tangible way. I'm super stoked about just getting to meet them. That's going to be really fun.
I showed this on Twitter, but I figured I could show a little visual.
Oh my God.
I had this costume that was just in the office for a long time.
Yes.
It doesn't say any name on it, except it says Paladin there. Paladin.
Which every kid wants to be for Halloween. Paladin.
But this is Strongheart, right? This is definitely the way Strongheart looks in even with everything going on, including that amazing mustache.
I am like sweating just looking at that, like knowing like how hot and unbreathable that costume is, and how incredibly flammable it probably.
Oh no, it's not flammable because it's. I don't know if you can read this, but it's a flame retarded Collegeville costume, so we're good.
Well, at least they put that right on the front there. Good warning. for people.
Totally going to use that when Strongheart shows up in.
Oh, please do that. Oh,
Well,
man.
yeah, I mean, there's your cosplay. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if anybody's got those action figures, go ahead, drop them on the board, or at least give them some tactile something to play with.
Yeah, but that's another theme in here too, right? Nostalgia, like not just,
Yeah.
the real world nostalgia for people who might still have fond memories of Warduke, but also trying to recover your lost item from when you were a child. If you choose to go that route in the story, there could be a lot of...
that is absolutely part of it. And kind of the idea of watching the way kind of kids can lose themselves in their imagination and just like so fully. And that was definitely part of it. Going into the carnival, playing characters, going to a carnival is kind of a surreal experience, when you think about it. And just, it really plays to what D&D is about. It's this collective imagination, but with that is nostalgia because of that childlike quality of being able to do that. I think that I'm excited to play this with my niece and nephew to watch that as well and just kind of share their imagination.
I love too how we were talking about the Feywild and how it's something you might lose or that Fey lost background. To me, the Feywild is a metaphor for losing childhood, to growing up, and I'm so glad that at least the three of us have never grown up and continue to play D&D and make pretend. And I wish more people out there were doing that. So that we're just by having this adventure and this story out here, I think we're doing a good thing.
Yes, we are. And this is a great story to remind yourself too.
Yeah.
You can still have fun and play make-believe and play. And
And
discover
wear a
rabbits.
silly costume.
And wear a silly costume. And be a bunny.
Be a bunny.
Be a bunny.
Yeah, with a cigar. Because why not? This has been so fun talking to you, Ari. I love how bouncing
there's so
around
much
ideas and getting to the heart of why things are in there and what's happening. And I can't wait for more people to check out The Wild Beyond the Witchlight September 21st.
Yeah, it's always great to chat with you, and I can't wait to actually hold the book in my hands, and
I know.
hopefully we get to play soon in person.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But if case not, I'm available virtually as well. If anybody, I'm desperate.
parties.
I'm desperate for a Witchlight game, please.
Yeah, we have to run the adventure or the carnival at least for sure.
Oh,
Definitely.
Yeah. That should be like a happy hour activity.
I know, right? I'm practicing my ring toss. I'm gonna be really good at it.
I got my Mirage teleporting around.
Cheater.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ari. Where can people find you online? Where's your handle?
I am at Ari Levitch on Twitter, but I am kind of hermit-like, and I don't post a ton. But but that's where I'm at. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Ari, and can't wait.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you.
So fun to talk to Ari. He brings so much creativity to the table, and it really just makes this whole world come to life hearing him talk about it.
And I love how excited he is to talk about it. Like, it's just, you can tell, like, even though he probably has not technically worked on it in a really long time, just given our lead times on things, it's just exciting to see that, like, it's still very fresh in his mind, and he's just jazzed to, as we are, to talk about it and to play in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now I want you to play in my my campaign with the girls. Maybe you can be a kid again.
Please, somebody, please invite me to a campaign.
You're
please.
invited.
Yay!
But watch out. Things happen. Maybe. We'll see. I don't know.
Okay. We'll see.
But we are excited, as we said, about D&D Celebration and the release of The Wild Beyond the Witchlight this month. So the best way to find out all about that and learn all of the upcoming news is to follow us on Twitter. We are at wizards_DND. Go to dungeonsanddragons.com to find out all about the latest products that are coming out. Or, of course, download Dragon Plus to your phone, where you can get tons of great previews, interviews, and content delivered every couple of months there. Some great stuff coming for The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, as well as Fizban's Treasury of Dragons in the near future. And that content, you don't have to get it on your phone. You can get it on dragonmag.com as well. And I hope you do, because there's a lot of stuff in there, and we'll get you all excited for what's to come. You can follow me. I'm at Greg Tito. What about you, Snail Racer?
I am at Shelly Moo. Not to be confused with the pink team snail from The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to keep bringing it up because it's maybe the coolest thing that ever happened to me.
It is pretty cool.
I'm in a
I think you
D&D
should make the image of that snail your profile pic for maybe just at least the release day of this adventure.
Or maybe forever.
Maybe forever.
I don't know if Shelly Moo actually has a picture, though.
We'll see. Just put a snail on there, and everyone will just know it's you.
Oh yeah, you know what? There is art of the snails racing. Unfortunately, I don't see the pink snail in this picture.
Well, you're gonna have to do some.
I can color it in.
Yeah,
Yep.
color it in with a crayon. Like this
you know
one is
what?
Shelly Moo.
Shelly Moo was probably so fast that they couldn't get her picture.
She would not stay for a portrait to be created.
Yes, so money on Shelly Moo. Money on
That's
pink.
awesome. Well, I want to give another shout out to the folks who produce this podcast for us, Ryan Marth and Lisa Carr. Thanks again
Yes.
for all they do putting this together. We don't always mention them every single episode, but
they're
we're
always
doing it
here.
right now.
And we love them.
They make this podcast go round
And
the
round.
clock
And everything else.
and everything else. It's true.
Literally everything else. We just show up.
Including what's going on with Drunky Two Shoes here. So you, Drunky, have been in the city of Waterdeep. You have made your way to the Garrulous Grocer, where Laryl Silverhand says there is some information that points to a enclave of doppelgangers that are plotting her demise and or assassination. And she wants you, the fighter Samson, who is also a harper, and your brother Daryl to root it out. And you had walked in, had a conversation with the halfling at the counter, and then went around to the back in order to try to sneak your way in, or at least bluff your way in. But unfortunately, the halfling guard there did not take your ruse of a minor illusion, trying to bring in some bread, I believe, from Pete's
Some
Bread.
grains and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So
George's.
you had failed your deception roll, and he said, "Wait a second. You don't need 3 people to deliver 1 box of... What's going on here?"
Oh, I'm training these guys. Our business is booming. And so I've recently hired a couple of guys here, but this service is my number one priority. And you don't just drop a box off and go. Like, I want them to see like the exchange, like you and I were friends and you're social and you're happy and we're customer. Like, you're not just a customer to me, you're family. And I need them to see that. And then when I drop this off, I don't just hand it to you and walk off. I want to go inside. I want to meet the other people. I want to look around. I'm going to place these beautiful grains products somewhere safe and special. And I'd love to say hello to, Joyce, the woman behind the counter. Can I say hello to her? We're good friends.
All right.
She loves me.
I'm going to roll insight with disadvantage, because that was pretty good.
Thank you.
Okay, roll me your deception and see whether you are
17.
17. Mm-hmm. All right. He says, "You know Joyce?
Yes.
None of this makes any sense, but if you need to just come in and drop it off, just go ahead and do that. All right."
Thank you. Oh, I got something for you for the kids in the truck too. I'll give it to you on the way out.
I hate kids. Just put it down.
Yeah. Well, it's poison. Okay, let's go. Come on, Daryl.
All right, so he kind of steps aside a little bit, and you walk into the storeroom area, and there is, large amount of produce here that's being sorted and put into crates for easy pickup by the customers outside. It's very messy. There are a few other halflings walking around and going about their business, but you also notice. Oh, actually, make me a perception check.
Oh, great. All excited when you said, and you notice. Oh, she's just going to. An 8. I'm not
An
really
8.
noticing much.
Okay, so you see some of the halflings that are bustling about, like going into a corner that's covered up by crates, and then they then you hear the sounds of stairs going down.
Okay.
Like footsteps going down. But the guard just moves aside for a second, and he asks you to or put down the delivery. Sit it down right there.
Oh, let me bring it in for you.
It's already inside. It's fine.
Let me put
it's
it-
going to get sorted by everything.
Can I see Joyce?
She's out in front. Why don't you just go walk around to the
Do you
front?
have a restroom?
What? No.
Oh,
There's a privy
I
a couple
need
doors down.
I really need a restroom.
Yeah, am I going to make you roll deception to see whether or not you look like you really need to crap your pants? How good are you at this?
Please. I need a restroom. Look, I'm crying.
Yeah. What'd you roll? What did you roll for another deception?
Oh, I thought you said you weren't going to make me.
No, I'm going to make you.
A 10?
Don't do it here. There's food everywhere.
Please.
Go out in the alley. That's what alleys are
I run.
for.
I just make a run for it and I go downstairs.
Okay. All right. Well, let's roll. We'll roll initiative and start
no.
it up with initiative at the top of our next session here.
You want me to roll now?
No, because I'll forget.
Okay. Damn it, I got a 19. Please.
We'll make a note. If you can remember that next time we record, then I'll go with the 19.
Okay. I'm crying.
I would have given you advantage on that deception check if you had cast like Stinking Cloud or something.
Shoot, I think I do have a cloud. I have a... Oh, no, I don't. That's a different... Oh, yeah, I do. I have fog cloud.
Well, next time you're trying to pretend that you have gas.
All right, noted.
All right. We'll pick it up next time.
Bye.
Bye.